The Battle of Stalingrad killed or wounded nearly 2 million people and destroyed one of the most powerful armies ever assembled. And the whole thing was doomed before the first shot was fired. Germany was running out of oil, and Hitler gambled everything on one desperate push south to get more. Then he became obsessed with the city, largely because it had Stalin's name on it. A side objective became the deadliest battle in human history. Of the 91,000 German soldiers who finally surrendered, only about 5,000 ever made it home. Germany captured 90% of the city and still lost. This is how that happened. The Battle of Stalingrad did not start with Stalingrad, it started with oil. In June 1941, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa. 3 million German soldiers invaded the Soviet Union, and the plan was simple: knock out Russia before winter, take Moscow, win the war. It did not work. Winter came, German soldiers froze in their summer uniforms outside Moscow, and by the spring of 1942, Germany was burning through fuel faster than it could replace it. Even with Romania pumping oil into the supply chain, it was not enough. So Hitler wrote a new plan. Case blue, forget Moscow. Go south and take the oil fields of the Caucasus, which produced more than 80% of all Soviet oil. He told his generals plainly that if he did not get the oil of Maikop and Grozny, he would have to end the war. This was not ambition, this was survival. And here is the thing about Stalingrad: it was not even the main objective. It was added as a flank guard, something to hold while the real prize, the oil, was captured further south. One German general later admitted that at the start, Stalingrad was no more than a name on the map. Then Hitler made the decision that would cost him everything. On July 23rd, he split his army in two. Army Group A would drive south toward the oil. Army Group B would drive east toward Stalingrad on the Volga River. Both at the same time, both under strength, both overextended, with their long open flanks held by Romanian, Italian and Hungarian divisions that lacked modern anti-tank guns. His generals warned him that the army did not have the strength to attack in two directions at once. Hitler answered that they had enough will, and that will was what mattered. Why did Stalingrad then become an obsession? 3 reasons. The city sat on the Volga, the biggest supply artery in Russia. Capture it, and you cut the country in half. The city was packed with weapons factories turning out tanks and artillery. But the biggest reason was the name. The city was named after Stalin, and that turned a military operation into a personal duel between two dictators. Neither man could afford to lose a city carrying the other man's name. Stalin understood what was coming. On July 28th, he issued Order No. 227. Not one step back. The order created punishment battalions for retreating soldiers and blocking detachments whose job was to shoot anyone running away. Stalin was not playing around. The first German units reached the outskirts of Stalingrad in late August. The advance across the steppe had been fast, too fast in fact. The supply lines stretched hundreds of kilometers and tanks sat motionless waiting for fuel. But the 16th Panzer Division drove all the way to the Volga north of the city. On August 23rd, the Luftwaffe flew 1,600 bomber sorties against Stalingrad in a single day and dropped 1,000 tons of bombs. The oil tanks along the Volga exploded and sent burning fuel into the river. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed in the bombing campaign, and the city was reduced to rubble. And here is the part the Germans did not think through. Rubble is far easier to defend than intact buildings. They had just spent 1,000 tons of explosives building the Soviets a fortress. The Germans launched their first assault on the city center on September 13th. That night, 10,000 men of the Soviet 13th Guards Rifle Division crossed the Volga under constant fire, counterattacked immediately, and retook the critical hilltop of Mamayev Kurgan. Within a week, most of them were dead. But they bought Stalingrad the time it needed. The Soviets needed a man to command the defense, and they picked General Vasily Chuikov. Blunt, aggressive, and terrifying to his own officers. Asked how he understood his mission, he answered that they would hold the city or die in it, and that there was no other option. Chuikov ordered his soldiers to hug the enemy, get so close to the German lines, 10 or 20 meters, that the Luftwaffe could not bomb them without hitting their own troops. German air power had been devastating in open country. In the ruins of Stalingrad, it became useless. The Germans gave this new kind of fighting a name: Rattenkrieg, the War of the Rats. Soldiers fought room by room, floor by floor, sometimes through holes blown in shared walls. Buildings changed hands 5 or 6 times in a single day. Storm groups of 6 to 8 men moved through sewers and basements with grenades, submachine guns, and sharpened shovels. One German soldier wrote in his diary that the soldiers were calling Stalingrad the mass grave of the Wehrmacht. Another wrote home that they had taken the kitchen, but the living room was still being contested. That was not a metaphor. The Soviets set up loudspeakers aimed at the German positions. Every 7 seconds, a German soldier dies in Russia, the voice said. Stalingrad, mass grave. Then a clock would tick, then a slow, sad tango would play. Day and night, the Germans called it the tango of death. The battles for individual buildings became legendary. Mamayev Kurgan changed hands so many times that the soil afterward contained up to 1,200 metal fragments per square meter. No grass grew there the following spring. Pavlov's house, a 4-story apartment building, was held by a single platoon for 58 days, and Chuikov joked that the Germans lost more men trying to take that one building than they lost taking Paris. The grain elevator was defended by around 30 Soviet soldiers against German assaults for nearly a week. A sniper named Vasily Zaytsev ran up 225 confirmed kills in 2 months. The story goes that the Germans sent their best marksman to hunt him down. Whether that duel ever really happened, historians still argue. Hollywood made a movie about it, so you know it must be true. By mid-November, the Germans held 90% of the city, but they could not finish the job. Chuikov's army clung to a strip along the Volga, only a few hundred meters wide in places. The Germans kept pushing, the Soviets kept bleeding, but they would not break. And then the hunters became the hunted. 2 Soviet generals, Georgy Zhukov and Alexander Vasilevsky, had noticed that the German 6th Army was completely fixated on the city, while its flanks were held by under-equipped Romanian, Italian and Hungarian divisions, stretched so thin that in places a platoon of 20 men covered a 2-kilometer sector. They designed a trap and called it Operation Uranus. Hit both weak flanks at the same time, race around behind the city, and snap the trap shut. Stalin approved a force of over 1 million men, 13,500 guns, and 900 tanks. On November 19th, at 7:20 in the morning, 3,500 Soviet guns opened fire on the Romanian Third Army. The Romanians broke within hours. The next day, a second force smashed through the Romanian Fourth Army south of the city. Both pincers raced for the town of Calac, and 4 days later they linked up. The trap was shut. Roughly 290,000 Axis soldiers were surrounded. It was the largest encirclement of the entire war. The 6th Army's commanders begged to break out while there was still time. Hitler refused to leave the Volga. Instead, Hermann Goring promised that the Luftwaffe could supply the pocket from the air. 300 tons a day, he said, no problem. His word was worth nothing. The 6th Army needed 300 tons a day just to survive. The Luftwaffe delivered an average of 94. It lost 488 aircraft, trying including a third of its entire eastern transport fleet. Goring had made a promise with other men's lives and other men's planes. In December, Field Marshal Erich von Manstein launched a desperate relief attempt called Operation Winter Storm. His tanks fought to within 48 kilometers of the pocket. Soldiers inside said they could see the flashes of Manstein's guns on the horizon. That close. But Hitler refused to authorize a breakout. A Soviet counteroffensive forced Manstein back, and the rescue was over. By January 1943, the 6th Army was dying. Temperatures fell to -40. Soldiers ate the horses, then the dogs, then the cats, then the rats. Typhus and dysentery tore through the ranks, and the daily bread ration dropped to a few ounces. The army that had conquered France in 6 weeks was starving to death in basements. On January 8th, the Soviets offered General Friedrich Paulus generous surrender terms: hot food, medical care, personal belongings, sidearms for the officers. Hitler forbade it. Then, on January 30th, the 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power, he promoted Paulus to Field Marshal by radio. The message underneath the promotion was not subtle. No German Field Marshal had ever been captured alive. Paulus was expected to understand what that meant. He understood, and he did not care. He told his officers he had no intention of shooting himself for that Bohemian corporal. The next day, Soviet soldiers found Paulus in the basement of the Univermag department store, and he surrendered. The first German field marshal ever taken alive. Hitler was furious, ranting that Paulus should have shot himself and swearing he would never appoint another field marshal. He then went on to appoint 7 more. 2 days later, on February 2nd, the last German holdouts in the northern pocket gave up. The Battle of Stalingrad was over. The numbers are staggering. Soviet casualties reached roughly 1.1 million. The Axis lost somewhere between 750 and 850,000 men. Tens of thousands of civilians died. Combined, nearly 2 million casualties in one battle over one city. Of the 91,000 who surrendered, most were already half dead. Thousands died within weeks of capture, and the survivors faced years of forced labor behind barbed wire. Only about 5,000 ever made it home to Germany. The last of them did not return until 1955, 10 years after the war ended. Back in Germany, the regime declared 3 days of mourning. Entertainment venues closed, and the radio played funeral music. It was the first time most German civilians understood how badly the war was going. On February 18th, Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels stood before 14,000 carefully selected fanatics in the Berlin Sportpalast and asked whether they wanted total war. They screamed yes. It was the closest the regime ever came to publicly admitting that Germany was losing. Stalingrad broke something in the German war machine that never got fixed. The Sixth Army simply ceased to exist, and from Stalingrad to Berlin, the Red Army never stopped advancing. Today the city is called Volgograd. On top of Mamayev Kurgan stands a statue of a woman raising a sword, 85 meters tall. It is called the Motherland Calls. Beneath her feet lie the remains of more than 34,000 Soviet soldiers. General Chuikov is buried there too, the only Soviet marshal buried outside Moscow. He asked to be laid to rest with his men. The deadliest battle in human history started because 2 dictators refused to lose a city with the other man's name on it. It ended with nearly 2 million casualties and an army frozen in its grave. And the whole thing might never have happened if Stalingrad had just been called something else.